So, you want to maintain control over your code repositories or just need the flexibility self-hosting can offer. You decided to deploy a custom Git server with a web interface on a private server without much hassle. This is the video you were looking for. By the end of this tutorial, you will know how to choose a reasonable hosting provider for your needs, configure the virtual private server, connect through SSH, configure the firewall, and secure the installation. Install Docker for easy Gitea deployment, install Nginx and certbot to have a nice web interface for the Git server with HTTPS certificate, and finally configure and access your Git server. There are many providers you can choose from. For a private Git instance, we want proper virtualization for security purposes, kernel-based virtualization, or KVM for short. Some providers offer OpenVZ, which doesn't isolate the kernel of the system and is in fact a container, but we need KVM. I recommend the KVM 2 plan on Hostinger, the sponsor of this video. The plan includes 100 GB of performant NVMe storage with automatic weekly backups, 2 virtual AMD EPYC cores, and 8 GB of RAM. Also, you get robust DDoS protection and a firewall. The price-quality ratio is really great here. Moreover, visit hostinger.com/verbux to find all the special deals and save even more by using the coupon code verbux at the checkout. So let's choose the KVM 2 plan, choose the period, create an account or login with Google, enter your payment details, and now the most important part. Press Have a coupon code button and enter Verbux and click Apply. As you can see, the code is applied and the discount is active. Now let's set up our KVM VPS. Here you can choose the data center location. I will select United States. Hostinger has a lot of operating systems to choose from, as well as ready-to-use setups. So now let's select Debian 11 box. We can choose to install Monarch's malware scanner and now set a strong root password. Next, let's add an SSH key for additional security. Hostinger provides us with a tutorial on how to create an SSH key on Linux or Windows. Once you have created your SSH key, copy the contents of the public key file into the text box. Enter any name for your SSH key and click Save. Now we are ready to launch our Hostinger virtual private server. Verify your VPS information and click Finish. Then just wait a couple of minutes. Now when we have our Hostinger VPS instance set up, let's connect to it using SSH. Copy the IP address or the host name and go to your SSH client. In my case, it is the terminal. Confirm the connection and let's update the packages. Oh, they are already updated. Now let's secure our server. Hostinger has built-in DDoS protection and a firewall. We will configure the firewall to avoid exposing any ports of the VPS server unintentionally. So from Hostinger dashboard create a new firewall configuration. Let's give it a name of SSH and web, since it is what we will use. Click the 3 dots button and edit the configuration. We will use port 22 for SSH Git interface, port 80 and 443 for web Git interface, and port 2200 for server SSH connection we will switch to later for additional security. Now when we have our ports configured, go back and activate the firewall configuration. Now we will go to our SSH connection and add non-root user. Now install the sudo package. Oh, it is already installed. Make our newly created user a superuser, copy the SSH connection data from root to the user and don't forget to set the appropriate permissions. And then we will use the vsudo command to make the sudo command runnable without the password, since we use the SSH keys. Press Ctrl X to save and exit. Now let's connect to non-root account of the server. This time we did not specify the username before the IP address because it matches our local username. Let's change this user's shell to bash and reconnect to check if it works. Great! Now let's edit the SSH configuration. We will disable root login, disable password authentication since we use SSH keys, and change SSH server's port from 22 to 2200. After saving the configuration, restart the SSH service. Now let's check if we can connect using our new port number. It works. Now let's proceed to installing Docker. We go to the official Docker website, find the instructions for Debian and copy the commands. We have just added the Docker repository. Now let's install the Docker packages. We install both Docker and Docker Compose. It may take a minute or two. Now let's add our user to the Docker group. Relog in to the server and check your groups. As you can see, the Docker group is there. Now let's create a directory for our Docker container. Set the appropriate permissions and navigate to the directory. Now let's create the Docker Compose configuration. Just paste the configuration, which you will find in this video description. As you can see, you can pre-configure your Gitea instance by setting variables in the Docker Compose file, but we will update the configuration later. Now write docker compose up command to launch the container. Now our Gitea instance runs locally on the server. To access it, we will make use of SSH port forwarding. With this command, we forward the server's local port 3000 to our localhost 3000, so now we can access the server's localhost. Let's configure Gitea. You can change the site title and other settings if you need. You can see that environment configuration is applied, so click Install. And in less than a minute you can register the administrator account. Write your desired username, email address and the password. Now when we have our administrator account created, let's edit the configuration for production. Open Gitea app.ini file. Go to the service configuration block and disable registration. Then update the domain and root URL with your website's domain. Remember to use the HTTPS protocol. Then restart the Docker container. OK, now install Nginx. Once it is installed, write an Nginx configuration file for Gitea. You can copy it from the description, but don't forget to change the server's name to your domain. Also, you can use the domain name provided by Hostinger if you want. Now create a soft link from sites available to sites enabled to enable the configuration. Check if it works and restart the Nginx service. Now go to your domain and check if it works. But as you can see, it works in HTTP only mode. We will refer to official source bot documentation to generate a Let's Encrypt certificate. So install the requirements, create a virtual Python environment, upgrade the Python package manager in that environment, and install certbot for Nginx. Create a soft link to the certbot executable, and finally generate a certificate. It may ask you some questions and email and a domain you want to activate. Check if the certificate has been installed properly, and now we can log in to our account. You may also ensure that the registration is disabled. So log in and create a repository. Choose any name. You can also make the repository private if you want. Okay, but now let's add our SSH public key to the Gitea account so we can use Git through its SSH interface on port 22. Okay, back to our repository. Copy the SSH repository address and clone it to our local computer. As you can see, it is currently empty. Let's write a hello world file and then add and commit the changes. Then push the changes to origin. Now you can see the file appeared in Gitea web interface. Isn't it amazing? Now you know how to deploy a full-fledged Git server with a web interface on a Hostinger KVM VPS. Don't forget to visit the link in the description and apply the code Verbox for a 10% discount.